My beloved children, listen closely, for I, your Creator, speak with a heart full of love, yet burdened with sorrow. This Christmas, as the world celebrates the birth of my Son, I call you to look deeper, to see beyond the festivities and the gifts, beyond the lights that adorn your homes and streets. I call you to awaken to the truth about the journey that my Son began on that sacred night, and the path he walked for all of humanity. Many of you celebrate his birth, yet few of you truly understand the depths of his purpose. The world, in its hustle and bustle, often forgets the true reason for this season. You see, my Son's coming was not for a simple celebration. It was for a purpose far greater than human comprehension. He was born into this world to bear witness to love, to teach you the way of righteousness, to guide you toward the light of truth. But his life and mission were not met with the ease and comfort that so many of you desire. His path was not easy, and his heart was burdened by the heavy weight of the world's pain. This Christmas, I speak to you not of the joy alone, but of the sacrifice and the struggle that his birth foretold. His life, his teachings, and ultimately his death, all of this was foretold long before he entered the world. You, my beloved children, must understand that his coming was not to bring comfort to those who were already comfortable, but to awaken the hearts of those who were lost, those who were broken, and those who lived in darkness. The world, so focused on material wealth, on possessions, on power, often overlooks the true riches, the riches of the soul, the love that transcends all understanding. My Son came to challenge these ideals, to expose the falsehoods that had gripped the hearts of many. He came to show you that it is not through earthly possessions or fleeting pleasures that you find peace, but through love, compassion, and humility. Yet, how many of you have ignored his message? How many of you have hardened your hearts to the truth he carried? How many of you have chosen the easy path of ignoring the suffering of your brothers and sisters, turning a blind eye to the pain that surrounds you? My Son did not come to build an empire of wealth or a kingdom of earthly power. He came to build a kingdom within your hearts. A kingdom of peace, of love, of forgiveness. But the truth, my children, is not always easy to bear. My Son was not born to please the crowds, but to save them. He was not born to seek fame or glory, but to suffer in silence so that you may have eternal life. His life was not a fairy tale, and his story was not a simple one. He was rejected by many, betrayed by those he loved, and ultimately crucified by those he came to save. But in his suffering, he exposed the truth. In his death, he revealed the greatest truth of all, that love conquers all, that the greatest sacrifice brings the greatest redemption. He died so that you might live, not just in this world, but in the eternal embrace of the Father. He died so that the darkness of sin might be vanquished, so that the chains of fear, hatred, and division might be broken. And yet, how many of you continue to live as if his sacrifice was in vain? How many of you continue to build walls between yourselves, to turn away from the suffering of others, to place your trust in things that will fade away? You, my children, are called to be the bearers of his light, to carry his message into the world, to love one another as he has loved you. This is the true meaning of Christmas, the birth of love, the birth of redemption, the birth of a new way of being. So I ask you now, on this sacred day, to look into your hearts and ask yourselves, have you truly embraced the gift my Son gave to you? Are you living in the light of his love, or are you still trapped in the darkness of your own desires? Are you truly following his teachings, or are you letting the world distract you from the path he has set before you? I have watched you all from the beginning of time. I have seen your struggles, your heartaches, your doubts. I have seen the pain that you carry, and I have seen how you sometimes turn away from the truth because it is difficult to face. But I am here, my children, to remind you that the truth, though sometimes painful, is the only path to freedom. The truth of my son's sacrifice is the key to your redemption, the key to healing, and the key to everlasting life. Do not let this Christmas pass without reflecting on what my son truly came to offer you. Do not let the noise of the world drown out the still, small voice that calls you to his side. Do not let the celebrations and distractions keep you from the greatest gift of all, the gift of love, the gift of grace, and the gift of salvation. For my son is not just a figure of the past, he is the living word, alive in each of you who choose to follow him. His message is not just for that time, it is for all time, and it is for you, here, now. He calls you to rise up, to take up your cross, to walk in his footsteps, and to share his light with a world in desperate need of hope. So this Christmas, I invite you to open your hearts fully to the truth of my son's life, death, and resurrection. I invite you to surrender your fears, your doubts, and your pain to him. I invite you to embrace his love, to let it heal the wounds within you, and to carry that love to those around you. This is the truth that I expose to you today, the truth that I have been speaking from the beginning of time. My son's coming was not just a moment in history, but a call to you, a call to change, a call to love, and a call to redemption. Embrace it, my children, and let it transform your hearts. Let this Christmas be the beginning of a new chapter in your life, a chapter written in the ink of love, grace, and truth. As I continue to speak to you, my beloved children, I urge you to understand that the call I place before you this Christmas is not a one-time invitation, but a lifelong journey. The truth of my son's sacrifice is not something that should be embraced once and then forgotten. It is a truth that should guide every thought, every action, and every breath you take. His light is not just for a single moment of your life, but for the entirety of your existence. My son, the Savior of the world, has not only offered his life as a gift to you but has shown you the way to live a life that reflects his love, his grace, and his mercy. This is not about empty rituals or meaningless words. It is about truly embodying the spirit of love that he displayed for you, love that is not bound by conditions, love that forgives, love that heals, and love that transforms. His birth into this world was the opening of a new chapter in the story of creation, a story that invites you to walk in the path of righteousness, to become vessels of peace and hope for a broken world. And yet, how often do you walk past suffering without a second thought? How often do you ignore the cry of the poor, the oppressed, the lonely, the weary? How often do you choose comfort over compassion, selfishness over service? You see, my children, the call to follow my son is not one of comfort. It is not a call to live for yourself, but to live for others. It is a call to lay down your pride, to let go of your ego, and to surrender fully to the will of God, just as my son did. For in his surrender, he found the fullness of his purpose, and in his sacrifice, he brought salvation to the world. This Christmas, my message to you is not just to celebrate the birth of a child, but to recognize the truth that this child grew to become the Savior of the world. And the truth is that his path was not easy. He walked among those who rejected him, he healed the sick, fed the hungry, and loved the outcasts of society. He did not come to be served but to serve. He did not seek fame or fortune, but the redemption of all souls. And in his final moments, he offered his life freely, so that you might be reconciled to the Father. But here lies the question, my children, what will you do with this truth? Will you continue to live for yourselves, or will you choose to live for something greater? Will you ignore the call, or will you rise to meet the challenge that my son laid before you? The choice is yours, but understand this. The path of true discipleship is not a path that the world will ever recognize or celebrate. It is a path of humility, of sacrifice, of love in the face of persecution, of forgiveness even when it is hardest to give. In a world that often values success, status, and wealth above all else, my son's message stands as a radical invitation to embrace something far more lasting and profound. True love, the love that never fails, the love that endures through all trials and tribulations. It is a love that asks you to forgive when others wrong you, to give when you have little, and to love those who are difficult to love. It is a love that does not look to the outward appearance, but sees the heart. This is the love my son demonstrated. This is the love he calls you to share with others. I know, my children, that it is not always easy to love in this way. The world will try to lead you astray, to distract you from the path of righteousness. There will be moments when your heart is weary, when you feel as if you cannot carry the burden of love any longer. But in those moments, I ask you to remember the example of my son. Remember his strength in the face of ridicule, his compassion in the face of betrayal, and his forgiveness in the face of unimaginable pain. He endured all of this not for himself, but for you. And here is where the message of Christmas becomes truly transformational. My son's birth was not merely to give you a story to tell or a reason to celebrate. His birth was to offer you the blueprint for a life of purpose, for a life that is truly fulfilling. He was born to remind you that your worth is not defined by what you possess or how others see you, but by the love you give and the grace you extend to others. So, as you reflect on his birth this Christmas, I ask you to also reflect on your own life. Are you living in a way that reflects his love? Are you walking in the way of righteousness, showing compassion to those around you, offering forgiveness even when it is hard? Are you willing to lay down your pride, to serve others, and to become a light in the darkness? I call you, my children, to rise up and embrace the truth of my son's message. I call you to stop living for the fleeting pleasures of this world, and to begin living for the eternal joy of serving others and loving as he loved. The time is now. The world is waiting for you to rise and be the hands and feet of my son, to carry his love to every corner of the earth, to be the change that this world desperately needs. It will not be easy, and it will not always be recognized, but it will be the most fulfilling and powerful life you can ever live. For in giving your life for others, you will find the fullness of life that my son has promised. Do not let this Christmas pass without fully embracing the truth of my son's love. Do not let the distractions of this world keep you from the calling that he has placed on your heart. Let his birth be the reminder that the greatest gift you can give this world is not wealth, status, or possessions, but love, the love that he first gave to you. And in giving this love, you will discover the deepest peace, the truest joy, and the most profound purpose. So rise up, my children. Embrace the truth. Embrace the love. Embrace the light of my son, and let that light shine through you, for the world to see. This is your calling, and this is your mission. Now, go forth and fulfill it. My beloved children, hear me once more, for my heart is heavy with both sorrow and hope. As you seek to embrace the truth of my son, remember that the world will not always welcome the light you carry. You are stepping into a realm where darkness will try to overshadow you, where the selfishness and pride of the world will seek to pull you back into the shadows. But I tell you, you are made for more. You are called to rise above this. You are not of this world, but of my kingdom, and I have equipped you with all that you need to walk in the path of light. The world will tell you that love is weak, that forgiveness is foolish, and that self-sacrifice is a sign of defeat. But in this world of fleeting desires, my children, the truth is the opposite. My son did not come to show you the way of power and might through weapons or force. He did not come to lead an army of warriors who would conquer by violence. No, his was the way of love. His was the way of sacrifice. His was the way of humility. And that is the way he calls you to follow. Understand, this is no small task. To live as my son lived, to love as he loved, to forgive as He forgave. These are not easy things. But it is the only way to truly live, the only way to live as I intended for you from the beginning. The world will look at you as though you are foolish, and it will try to make you believe that you are giving too much, sacrificing too much. But I tell you this, there is no greater joy than to lay down your life for others. There is no deeper fulfillment than to love those who hate you, to bless those who curse you, and to give without expecting anything in return. You see, when you embrace this kind of love, the love that my Son embodied, you are not just living for yourself. You are participating in the greatest work the world has ever known, the redemption of all things. For every act of love, every act of forgiveness, every act of humility, you are shining a light in the darkness, tearing down the strongholds of fear, and showing the world that there is a greater way to live, a way of peace, of unity, of divine grace. But let me make this clear. To walk in this way, you must let go of the self-centered ways of the world. You must die to your desires for worldly recognition, for wealth, for status. You must let go of the need to be seen as important in the eyes of the world. For I tell you, my children, those who humble themselves will be exalted in my kingdom. And those who seek to make themselves great in the eyes of the world will find that they have gained nothing at all. So, do not be swayed by the fleeting praise of man. Do not be deceived by the empty promises of the world. Do not think that comfort and success will bring you the joy that my Son has promised. No, my children, it is in the lowliest places, in the places of sacrifice, in the places of pain, that you will find true fulfillment. It is in giving your life for others, in choosing to love when love is not reciprocated, that you will know the peace that passes all understanding. There will be moments when you feel as though the weight is too much to bear, when you question whether it is worth it to love and forgive. But in those moments, remember this: my Son walked this path before you. He felt the weight of the world upon his shoulders, the rejection of those he loved, the pain of betrayal, and the anguish of death. And yet he did not falter. He did not give up. He did not retreat. He pressed on, for he knew the power of his sacrifice and the glory that awaited him on the other side. And in the same way, my children, you are called to press on. Even when the path is difficult. Even when the world seems to mock you. Even when you feel that your love is not being received or your efforts are going unnoticed. Your labor is not in vain. Every act of love, every act of forgiveness, every act of service is a seed planted in the kingdom. And in due time, that seed will bear fruit. You may not see it immediately, but know that my word never returns void. What you sow in love, you will reap in abundance. This Christmas, I call you to a higher purpose. I call you to embrace the truth of my Son's life, his death, and his resurrection. I call you to let his light shine through you, not just in the quiet moments of prayer, but in every aspect of your life. I call you to reflect his love in your relationships, in your work, in your communities, in your homes, and even in the way you treat those who are difficult to love. As you gather around the table this Christmas, as you exchange gifts and share in the joy of the season, I ask you to also remember the true gift, the gift that my Son gave to you, and the gift that you are called to give to the world. The gift of love, the gift of sacrifice, the gift of a heart willing to serve. Do not let this season pass without embracing this call. Do not let the distractions of the world blind you to the deeper reality of my kingdom, the reality that my Son's love is the most powerful force in the universe, and it is the love that is at the heart of every true believer. It is the love that is your strength, your refuge, and your salvation. As you look upon the nativity scenes, as you remember the humble birth of my Son in the manger, know that his coming was not just for a moment in time. It was for all time. And it is for you. He came to show you the way of love, to lead you out of the darkness, and into the light of my eternal kingdom. This is the message of Christmas, that love is the greatest power, and in it, you will find your truest joy and purpose. So go forth, my children, and live as my Son lived. Love as he loved. Serve as he served. And in doing so, you will not only find life, but you will become the bearers of life to a world that desperately needs it. The time is now. The kingdom of heaven is at hand, and it is within you. Walk in the light, my children, and let it shine for all to see.